From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I'm Carla Gonzalez, and this is From the South. Israel has passed a controversial law that has defined the country as an exclusive Jewish state, declaring that only Jews have the right to self-determination. The nation's state law declared Hebrew as the official language, stripping Arabic from its official language status. The law also defines the establishment of Jewish communities as being of national interest. Many Arab lawmakers condemned the bill, calling it racist and verging on apartheid against the 1.8 million Palestinians living in Israel. They protested in parliament by ripping up copies of the law.
The nationality bill is a hate crime. They are totally discriminating against the Arab citizens, against the Arab minority, with racist articles, especially those of Jewish settlements, and those articles downgrading the status of the Arabic language.
While unabated by the protests, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said it is a defining moment in the history of Zionism and the State of Israel.
We will keep ensuring civil rights in Israel's democracy. These rights will not be harmed, but the majority also has rights and the majority decides. An absolute majority wants to ensure our state's Jewish character for generations to come.
Nicaragua is celebrating the 39th anniversary of the Sandinista revolution this Thursday in the midst of a concerted campaign to remove the Sandinista government. On Wednesday, the Organization of American States, or OAS, met in Washington and passed a resolution that condemned all acts of violence, repression, and human rights violations and abuses committed by police, parapolice groups, and others in the country. They also called on Nicaraguan President Daniel Ortega to set a date for early elections, even though Ortega said already he has no intention of bringing elections forward. His foreign minister said the OAS was trying to repeat the Contra War of the 1980s.
Groups of armed terrorists, kidnapping policemen, kidnapping other people, women, teachers, murdering teachers, setting up their operational center inside a polytechnic with a torture center. Nicaragua has been through this before, in the 1980s, when people were instructed and taught with manuals written by the CIA how to kill Nicaraguans.
Venezuela's Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza also rejected a move by some countries at this year's CELAC EU summit to criticize Nicaragua. The European Union called on Nicaraguan government to put an immediate end to violence, repression, and arbitrary detentions in the country. The European Union also offered to mediate in talks between the government and the opposition.
Yesterday we apologized on behalf of the people of Latin America because some countries spoke without placing it on the agenda of the CELAC and without presenting it in the dialogue with the European Union meeting as they should have done. They brought up the topic of Venezuela and Nicaragua, following a script that the United States gave them so they can just repeat it and facilitate conditions for intervention in the region and against leftist and progressive governments. This is our history. We have always been disturbed, intervened by the intentions of the United States. There are ruling elites in some countries that are subordinates of the United States, and they have a role to fulfill. We also have to understand that as a reality, to understand its dimensions in this type of forum.
Meanwhile, in Masaya, people gathered to do a cooperative cleanup in the city after the ongoing violence damaged private and public property. The indigenous community of Monimbo repaired the streets and parks and other public areas in Nicaragua. The collective efforts occurred just before the commemorations for the Sandinista revolution in 1979. In Brazil, the Electoral Supreme Court rejected a request to suspend former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva's presidential candidacy for October's election. According to the president of the Electoral Court, Rosa Weber, the request was filed by the right-wing movement Free Brazil Movement. She added the request is time-barred as the moment to discuss the legacy of candidates has yet to come. The period for candidate registration is scheduled for August. Our correspondent in Sao Paulo, Ignacio Lemus, brings us more.
Saludos, la ministra del Supremo Tribunal Federal, Rosa
The head of the Electoral Court, Rosa Weber, rejected a request aimed to prevent Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva's presidential candidacy, filed by the Free Brazil movement, formed by liberal youth, many of them students in the United States. Rosa Weber described the request as generic and rushed, and added that for these reasons she didn't even consider it. This decision is linked to the so-called clean tab law that prevents a convicted person in 2 instances from running for elections. But according to the Electoral Court, this cannot be applied to Lula, because then this law would overcome the electoral law and also the appeals that Lula's defense team can still file. Meanwhile, the former president is expected to present his candidacy on August 15th in Brasilia. We will keep following the news.
Ignacio Lemus from Sao Paulo. We'll take a short break now, but join us again after a video from our multimedia team. Welcome back. As Colombia sees a new wave of violence against leaders of social movements, the system of transitional justice, agreed as part of the peace deal with the FARC, is beginning to examine those responsible for crimes during the decades of armed conflict.
Since 2008, the mothers of Soacha and relatives of the victims of extrajudicial executions in Colombia have claimed for justice for their murdered relatives. Now, retired Army General Mario Montoya, linked to the killings, will appear in a court of the Special Jurisdiction for Peace. The victims' families are celebrating this decision.
General Montoya was the major commander of the army at that time, and he's the one who has to clarify who committed or ordered those crimes.
The Special Jurisdiction for Peace is aimed to investigate the armed conflict in the country by looking into those involved in it with the help of an integral system of truth, justice, reparation for the victims, and non-repetition.
According to the General Prosecutor's Office, Montoya, as General Commander of the Army, ordered thousands of extrajudicial killings. There are around 2,400 death cases being investigated by the Prosecutor's Office that took place between February 2006 and November 2008.
The lawyer of the former Army General stated that despite the links he has with the case, known today as false positives, it is impossible that his client could have known about all these murders. He had 465,000 men under his command. On their part, FARC leaders said that the country is expecting more people involved in the armed conflict to appear before a court of the Special Jurisdiction for Peace.
Not only military members have to appear in court, we must also investigate politicians and businessmen as well. Big multinationals must also appear in court because they have caused too much harm to this country through this conflict.
The request of former General Montoya in court will be debated by judges of the Special Jurisdiction for Peace.
Hundreds of workers from Argentina's state news agency Telam demonstrated in front of the presidential residence known as Quinta de los Olivos. Protesters rejected once again the government's decision to lay off 357 people from the news agency. Meanwhile, President Mauricio Macri was reassuring his people the country will overcome its economic troubles, this at a press conference inside the residence. He also said his government is expecting economy to grow again in 2019. Regarding Telam, Macri justified the massive layoffs, saying the agency was overflooded with workers.
The economic growth we previously had is going to decrease. We are going to have a few months in which the things we have formulated have to mature. We are going to resume growth next year, and we will generate new jobs.
Still in Argentina, small producers rejected the government's decision to eliminate a special tax payment system that benefited them and allowed them to receive social benefits and retirement pensions.
The individual social agricultural tax payment system was created in 2009 with around 50,000 people that contributed to get family health insurance and retirement pensions. But the office in charge of the social program was eliminated by President Mauricio Macri's administration.
They are forsaking us. This system is going to cost money and many people can't pay for it. If these people can't even pay for electricity, how will they pay for this?
We will mobilize in every province in the country for our lands, for our jobs, for our water, for a family agriculture law, for the re-establishment of the social agricultural system. Every organization of small producers will do it.
New agricultural policies implemented by the government will prevent around 300 million pesos from being saved and reused for the same sector.
This is a real emergency. If only the government would use 1% of the taxes paid by the big producers, they could benefit 100,000 small producers around the country.
Workers from the Agro-Industry Ministry were also affected by these adjustments with hundreds of layoffs. They will join the protest and will participate in the truck protest set for July 26th.
The workers were unfairly dismissed and we want their immediate reincorporation. We want the public policies that were being carried out before. We want the socio-agricultural individual tax system to support all the campesinos.
Despite the crisis they are facing, small producers of the Land Workers Union gave away 10,000 kilos of vegetables to support people in the same situation.
I came to get at least some vegetables, to make a soup or something. This is terrible.
These bags are a symbol of people suffering. Our bags are empty because we don't have a single peso to buy food. We don't have a job or income. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't like that. Only the most vulnerable ones are here, the people in need.
Small farmers produce 60% of the food that reaches every Argentinian home. They said that if they don't get a response after the protest, they won't stop mobilizing.
Green handkerchiefs symbolizing abortion rights are once again filling the streets of Buenos Aires and other cities in Argentina to call for the abortion bill to be passed in the Senate. The green handkerchiefs have become the main weapon for women who support the feminist fight for women's rights, in a country where handkerchiefs hold a great symbolism. The white ones were the symbol of the grandmothers of the Plaza de Mayo. The Senate is currently discussing the bill on abortion, which was passed by the lower house on June 14. The final vote is scheduled for August 8.
We feminists thought about something that identified us, something that made us recognizable amongst ourselves as being in favor of this right, and to link this right to the fight for human rights, understanding that abortion is a human right for women.
Relatives of the victims of the 1994 AMIA bombing attacking Argentina gathered in Buenos Aires to demand justice. Demonstrators urged the government to clarify the case against the Jewish Center while carrying pictures of the 85 victims killed in the attack. The event was headed by the Organization of American States Secretary General Luis Almagro and AMIA's president Agustín Cebar. The trial against Carlos Tejeldín, accused of being responsible of preparing the van with explosives, is expected to start in 2019. The demonstration and tribute to the victims started at 9:53 local time, the exact time the bomb exploded. A mass was held in Mexico to pay tribute to the 13 victims of a massacre in the southern state of Oaxaca. Hundreds of floral crowns filled the local church. Residents mourned the victims killed this week over a land dispute between two communities. Incense escorted the coffins with the victims' remains, members of the community of Santa Maria Ecatepec. The two groups have been fighting over a 3,600-hectare patch of land since 1976. In Peru, activists are calling for the government to address rising pollution in the nation, having gathered 30,000 signatures to present to the Health Ministry. Let's go to our correspondent Jaime Herrera with the latest.
Civil society has gathered over 30,000 signatures against pollution, and they plan to deliver them to the Health Ministry, requesting three things. First, they demand an investigation into what are the sources of pollution that affect thousands of Peruvians in different indigenous and campesino communities around the country. Second is that people that are affected by water contamination be provided with safe drinking water. But the third and most important request is that these communities receive proper health care and a better quality of life, since the contamination has caused widespread health problems. Today, representatives from 9 communities from across the country are taking part in this request to the Health Ministry, but they are also holding cultural and artistic activities that showcase the suffering of their communities due to pollution.
That was Jaime Herrera from Lima. According to environmental organizations, Peru has seen a spike in conflicts over the control of natural reserves. Let's see, we have that story on Peru.
According to a study carried out by geographer Dionel Martinez, 10 natural reserves have either been surrendered or in the process of being handed over to mining companies. One of these reserves is the mountain of Osangate in the region of Cusco.
On the one hand, this is a water reserve, and in a context of climate change, we need to safeguard our water supply. And on the other hand, there is also the ecological issue. There are important ecosystems that we have to protect.
According to the Agency of Mining Conflicts, these policies have been causing conflicts for over 20 years, reaching the highest number of protests in the last 3 years.
There is social tension and concern over how big investment projects linked to mining are approved within 15 days and without the people knowing what is even being approved.
For the ecological movement, President Martin Vizcarra has not carried out any meaningful changes to prevent social conflicts, nor to resolve them. An example of this is the criminalization of protesters, with dozens of leaders being charged with breaking the law, as well as the agreements between the police and the mining companies.
The institutional system is not allowing the resolution of these problems or to establish a more harmonic and cohesive relationship. We believe this is linked to the institutional system that needs to be reformed.
But according to the social and environmental organizations, the fundamental problem is the neoliberal system by which the mining activities are prioritized, even violating the rights of campesino and indigenous communities, affecting their natural and cultural resources.
The Mexican charter company which owns the plane that crashed in Cuba in May says human error was the cause of the crash, but that's being disputed by authorities. Damosh Airlines said a study of the data recorders showed the Boeing 737 had taken off too steeply. The Boeing 737 and its Mexican crew had been leased from Damosh by the Cuban state airline Cubana. However, the Cuban commission created to investigate the accident responded by saying that a process of this magnitude requires the analysis of multiple factors, which they have yet not concluded. They say any statement about the possible causes for the fatal accident is premature. 112 people were killed in the May 18 accident, and only one person survived. We'll take one last short break, but join us again after another video from our multimedia team.
And talk to a couple voters for us. Everyone's doing it for the first time and doing an amazing job.
Welcome back. As Pakistan prepares for its general election set for July 25th, political campaigns have been in full swing. We are joined by Farouk Tariq, one of the candidates from Awami Workers' Party, a radical left party contesting from Karachi. Hello, Farouk. What are the most important issues for Pakistani voters in these elections?
The most important issue is really the intervention of the military and judicial establishment in directing the outcome of this election, which has been become one of the main issue during the election campaign. They are trying their best that Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, the movement for justice of Imran Khan, that party should win the elections. So there is already sort of a pre-poll rigging before the elections, and that has become a hue and cry for almost all the main political parties in Pakistan.
So talk to us about your party. It's a left-wing party. What are your focus? What are your plans?
Our party is called Awami Workers' Party, People's Workers' Party, established in 2012 after merger of three political left-wing parties. It has put up over 50 candidates all over Pakistan, and this is the second time that we are contesting. Although we have not won any elections, but we had won local councillors 2 years back, and parties mainly contesting for the supremacy of the civilian government and also for the women rights, labor rights, human rights, minority rights, and so on. And we're also speaking about the climate change and about the human development instead of the infrastructural development, which has been the main priority of the last government of Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz.
And it seems many in the left are waiting and supporting Bilawal Bhutto and the return of the PPP as a more progressive government. Do you see any chances of this happening?
No, they are in power in one of the provinces, and they might be in power in for this elections as well. But it's very difficult for this party to take power at federal level. Although Bilawal is speaking quite good, he is talking about living wage, he is talking about food sovereignty, he is talking about labor rights, and he has become one of the sober spokesperson of a political party, much better than his father, who was Mr. Asif Zardari, who was president of Pakistan earlier. But they will not really take power at the federal level, and they might be in power in one of the provinces called Sindh.
Thank you very much, Farouk, for your time.
Okay, welcome.
We've been talking to Farouk Tariq on the Pakistani elections. Now let's have a look at some other stories making headlines around the world.
British police have identified several Russian citizens who they believe are behind the nerve agent attack on former Russian agent Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia in March. Britain has blamed Russia for the poisoning, although Russia has repeatedly denied any involvement in the attack. 8 men have been arrested in connection with Boko Haram's abduction of more than 200 schoolgirls from the town of Chibok in northeast Nigeria in 2014. The mass abduction of the schoolgirls caused widespread outrage and sparked a global campaign for their release. But so far, only 107 girls have been freed, according to the government.
Involved in the Chibok girls attack, while the remaining ones are part of the suicide bombings that is taking place all over the town. Then they also confessed to attacks on Bama, Goza, Mubi, and other towns. But as for the Chibok girls, it's 8 of them that confess to be part of the Chibok girls.
Swedish firefighters are struggling to contain wildfire spreading across the country, triggered by the hot and dry season. At least a dozen wildfires have been reported inside the Arctic Circle. Government has asked for international help. At least 19 Italian planes have been brought in to douse the fire.
And with that, we come to the end of this news brief. But as you know, there's and other stories you can find on our website at telesurtv.net/English. And be sure to also follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.
Queremos verdad, reparación.